Hey, what's up everyone? Tim here from Everyday Tactical Vids, and we're at SHOT Show 2017. We spent a day out at the range, and now we're out on the floor looking at all kinds of gear. We're looking at bushcraft knives, survival knives, folding knives, flashlights, packs, and so much more. I want to give a big shout out to Thrunite, who helped make this trip possible. Now let's head out onto the floor and see what they have for us.
What we're going to talk about today is a little bit more. Yesterday we had a discussion about different things that we could manufacture off the landscape, and we had a pretty broad discussion about the 5 C's and a few other things yesterday. What we're going to discuss today is more about what we can do to secure food in a bushcraft scenario if we're not bringing a lot of stuff in. And for me, you know, steel traps are always going to be the way I go for food, because you don't run out of steel traps. It's not like I ran out of ammunition or something like that. You don't run out of a steel trap, they last forever. But if you're in a situation where you don't have those steel traps, you need to make certain things for catching game and processing food, it's not that difficult to do as long as you have the skill level with your knife and the proper tools to do that. So that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. Now, the first mentality that I have when it comes to finding food is that you need to secure a location on the water's edge. On the water's edge is the place to find food. Every animal needs water, just like people do. So they're going to go there. You got fish that may possibly live in that water. You've got amphibians and reptiles that may live in that water. Birds have to come to that water, and mammals have to come to that water. So your best chance of finding animal sign, which is what you're looking for when you're trapping animals, other than obviously the live animal itself, for setting traps and snares and making nets and things like that, is to find that animal sign to be able to effectively get that game. So let's talk about water's edge mentality real quick and some simple things that we can do to take game around the water's edge. The first thing I would say, as far as the tool goes, that you want to make that's very simple is something like this frog and fish gig. And this one's been cut off. It was about this long. And you really always want these things to be above eye level so you don't trip and fall into them when you're walking. So this one's cut off for demonstration purposes, but you want something that's got 4 tines on it, that's got barbs on it, that's split out so you can get and stick things with it, whether that be a snake, a fish, a frog, it doesn't matter, you can get it with this. And it's a very simple tool to construct. You really don't need anything but a knife to make this tool. So this is probably one of the first tools that I would make for securing game around the water's edge. Beyond that, I'm going to be carrying some bank line with me, so I'm probably going to throw a few little fish hooks and some sinkers in my kit because they don't take up a lot of room. It's easy to find bait. If I kill a couple frogs, I got bait. If I kill a couple snakes, I've got bait. If I can dig up worms and grubs, bust into a rotten log, I've got bait. So things like these line holders are very simple to make, and you can use these to use bank lines to trap fish or limb lines to catch fish. And it's very, very simple. The next thing you can do is you can make nets, and you can make these net making tools off the landscape. You don't have to carry them, you can make them very easily. You need a net shuttle and you need a mesh gauge, and the mesh gauge is going to give you a determination of the size of the holes in your net when you're making that. And what I like to do with mine is, a lot of times I've found that I can get away with not carving this because I've got my Moore knife sheath, and this Moore knife sheath works really, really well for a mesh gauge so that I can make my meshes on this sheath and pull them off. And this sheath is about 1.5 inches across, which gives me a 3-inch mesh in my net. So I'm going to get some pretty good sized fish in that. And what I like to do is, I like to make a stop net that's about 6 to 8 feet across and about 4 feet deep. We call them stop nets when I fish down Florida. And what you do is you take that thing downstream and you run it across and you put a couple rocks on the bottom of it to hold it. And you walk upstream 50, 60 yards and just start walking in the water. The fish are going to run from you. They're going to run right into that net and get gilled, and you got all the food you want. Okay? So that's a very simple way to secure food as well. Now you can get a little bit more complicated with things, and you can make traps as well. And traps take a little bit more finesse to make depending on what you're doing, but there's also some very simple ways to make traps that don't take a lot of fancy carving. They're just not going to catch as big of an animal. So if you don't mind eating mice, rats, and chipmunks, which never bothered me any, just burn the fur off of it and cook it, you can make simple trigger systems like this. That's called a promontory peg trigger. And they found hundreds and hundreds of these triggers in a cave out west that were carved from everything from wood to bone. So we know they use these on small game. And they're very good with dead falling devices for chipmunks, mice, and rats. And you take a simple stick and you make a cut halfway through one side flip it over, make a cut halfway through the other side. You can do that just by rocking your knife on it. And then you barber chair that thing off, carve a point on one side, and make it a little bit shorter so there's no friction or binding here than the other length. Then you take that and you find a dead falling device, whether that's a log, a rock, a slab, it doesn't matter what it is, and you balance the rock on top of this, and you're going to put your bait here. So it's already broken away partially with your bait attached to it. And when the animal comes up to work the bait off, he's going to pull it forward and split this trigger, and it will kick the bottom out like this, and the deadfall will fall. The one thing you have to remember is with any deadfalling device is that the deadfall device has to be 5 times heavier than the animal you're trying to kill. So you're not really going to crush the animal with a deadfall. The pretense of a deadfall is not to crush an animal, it's to suffocate the animal. So the weight of that deadfall has to be heavy enough that when the animal tries to breathe, every time he breathes out, he can't breathe enough air in. Breathe out, breathe in, and sooner or later, he just can't breathe anymore and he suffocates. That's how deadfalls work. So smaller deadfalls for smaller game are very simple to make. When you get into bigger deadfall devices, like something that's a figure 4, that you're going to use a large log on, then you're going to have to do some more complicated carving, because this is going to require several different notches and all the pieces have to fit together really well. What I like to do with my deadfall with my trigger stick is I like to put a fork in the front of that thing so that I can really bury whatever bait I'm putting on there so it's hard to get off. That way they got to work at it. That's what you want. You want them to have to work for that bait. And you want to make this thing so that it goes off very easily. So what you do is you take this and you put a ramp on it. Instead of just being a straight notch in there, it's a curved notch, so it's a ramp. On the front side of this, you make it nice and flat, because what you want to happen is when this is locked in here, you want that thing to slide down this front flat and slide away so that it unlocks very easily. You don't want him to have to push it out of a notch. You want it to just slide down when he pulls it and come out. So what's going to happen is you have a fulcrum stick here, and this is where your deadfall is going to sit on top of. And your deadfall always needs to be at less than or equal to a 30-degree angle, never above that, because the more room you give that thing for air falling, the easier it is for him to escape it. The next thing you want to make sure of is that this bait stick is long enough that it goes back in the trap as deep as it can go. Again, you got less margin for error by the acute angle created by that deadfall in the back than you do in the front. So what's going to happen with this is you're going to put this on here and lock it together, and the friction on the front of this from the weight is going to hold this thing in place. And it's really difficult to do this with your hands, but it can be done, because it takes quite a bit of weight pushing against it. Whew. Somebody come over here and give me a volunteer hand real quick. Who's got a volunteer? I want you just to push right here. All right? All right, push down on that thing. Hold steady on it. Yep, push it down. Push down. You got to get that thing in the notch right there. There you go. Now push. Don't push down this way. Kind of push down this way, because it's not going to. The weight's not going to be here. It's going to be here. Okay. You can see how sensitive that thing is. The wood's drying out on me too, and it's getting a little bit. You're not pushing down hard enough, man. Push down. There you go. Okay. So now it doesn't take hardly anything to set that off. And when that goes off, what's going to happen is this stick is going to go up this way over the trap. This stick's going to get pushed because of this ramp. This stick's going to get pushed away from the trap, and that leaves nothing under the deadfall. Because if this stuff is under the deadfall, then you're creating space there. You're not suffocating the animal. So the trick to this is to get everything to fall so that it goes away from the trap, and the only thing under the trap is the animal. That's the trick to it. So you got a lot of tricky notches you have to do for stuff like this, but what you have to remember about trapping is, and even fishing is the same way, everything is about numbers. It's about percentages. The more of them I have, the more chance I got to catch an animal. So when you're sitting around your camp at night, you're whittling these. You're making these. You're taking your Moore knife and you're whittling these things out all night long. So the next day you can go out and set 10 or 12 of them. If you're making these small triggers like these promontory pegs, you know, you can make 20 or 30 of them sitting around the campfire really easy. Go out and set them the next day. Nets, fishing, those are the ways to secure game. Now, once you've got that taken care of and you've got your game secured, now you got to figure out how you're going to cook that game. And you're going to bring a metal pot with you, most likely, even if it's something as simple as just a bottle and cup that can be used over the fire to cook in. So something like this pot out of this cook set will work just fine for that. And I can cook in this pot. Nothing to put a set of frog legs in that, dude, and cook them up and boil them if I want to. Nothing to put some fish in there. But I'm going to want some enhancements with this because this is just my basic level stuff. So maybe I want to carve myself a couple spoons. Maybe I want to make myself a bowl, something to drink out of besides this pot because I want to use it to cook in. That requires bushcrafting skills and tools, and that's where all of this bushcraft comes in. And I think a lot of people make the mistake nowadays of confusing bushcraft and survival, and they're not the same things at all, okay? Survival is making sure that you're prepared with what you need in an emergency scenario to last at least 72 hours. That's emergency survival. And so that's going to require the 5 C's that we talked about yesterday. A cutting tool, a container, a combustion device, a cover element, and cordage. You got those 5 C's, you can last a 72-hour scenario. What we're doing now is, now we're planning to be there and we want to smooth it. But we don't want to carry all the stuff in. We want to be able to manufacture stuff off the landscape by what was called woodcrafting. Now it's called bushcraft. In the 20s and 30s it was called woodcraft. Now it's called bushcraft. And that means making things like simple tongs that we can manipulate food with over the fire, making bow drill kits to start fires with, to practice our primitive skills, making feather sticks that have lots of surface area for ignition, being able to make things like these pine needle baskets while we're sitting around the fire, carving bowls, carving kooksas, carving spoons. Those are bushcraft type skills that require very simple tools. There's 5 things that I really need to do to manipulate wood material. I need to be able to split the grain, so I need an axe or a large knife or a full tang knife that I can split the grain with. I need to be able to cross cut the grain, so I need something that, like a saw that's going to cross cut that grain. I need to be able to bore holes in material, so I need some type of an awl, and that's very easy. Just a sharp stick, the sharp end of a knife, or a nail, anything like that will work for an awl, so that I can lace up barks to make containers if I want to, or quivers or bigger containers or baskets. Then I need something that I can put concavities in the wood, which is a hook knife. And this hook knife, this is a European style hook knife, and there's also what's called a crooked knife. And the crooked knife was something popular in the U.S., and it was called the Makatagan by the Native Americans. And Blue Jacket said that the 3 most important things in his life were his wife, his axe, and his crooked knife. So that's how much value he put on this tool, because this tool would allow him to plane wood, and it would also allow him to make concavities in wood that you can't do otherwise unless you're going to burn the wood effectively and burn a hole into the wood. So you need that tool. And then the last thing you need to be able to do is shape the wood to any shape you want it, and your knife will do that task for you. So while we have certain tools that we use for survival and certain knives we have for survival, a bushcraft tool is different than a survival tool. And that's really where Mora has kind of come into the market now with the Garberg knife as a survival tool. It's a full tang knife that you can really abuse, and you're not going to tear that thing up. That's a survival type tool. And then they've got other knives on the market like the Companion series, like the 511, 510, the Cansball. The Cansball is made specifically for processing meat and game. That's why it's got this narrow profile on the front for skinning animals, but it's got a robust enough spine that I can do fine carving work with it, use it as a spoke shave because it has a 90-degree spine for processing material. So this is an all-around bushcraft knife. So a lot of these other Moras become a secondary tool. You know, the old saying is 2 is 1, 1 is none. So I've got one on my hip, that's my fail-safe, but if I'm going to do fine carving work or bushcrafting, I want a dedicated knife for that, because I don't want to use the knife that I've been bashing through wood all day to do fine carving work with, because it's not going to be as sharp as the one that I protected for my bushcrafting knife, like these examples here. So Mora has now ran the gamut, and now they have the Eldris, which is their answer to like the pocket style knife, which is a smaller knife. Let me have an Eldris real quick, brother. This is the Eldris, and this knife has got the same blade profile on the front end as the Cansball exactly. So you've got a small pocket tool now, or a neck tool that you can use for skinning game and processing meat, but it's also just a great utilitarian type blade. It's like carrying a utility knife in your pocket, because you can take this thing and you can carry this in your pocket as a standalone without this clip on it and without this rope on it. You can just shove that thing in a pocket, like a cargo pocket of a pair of pants that fits perfect. Or you can put the retention strap on this thing and you can carry it inverted as a neck knife. So it's a very simple tool that Moore's created to give you more versatility in your kit and give you another style backup knife, because neck knives are so popular now. So Moore really has a lot of good tools for bushcrafting, and I think it's important for people to understand that there's a big difference between bushcraft and survival, and you buy the proper tool for the proper job. That's the key to it right there. What is that knife's design intent? I see a lot of people bashing non-full tang knives that weren't designed for that through logs, and that's where they come into problems. If you want to bash that thing through a log, grab a Garberg, I promise you'll never break it. If you want to do fine woodworking, get yourself a 511, get yourself a companion, get a Cansball for around camp, get an Eldris for just hiking through the woods with your kids. Those are what Moore knives are great for. Well, I appreciate you guys joining me today for this quick presentation on what you can make in camp to make life easier, how to secure meat sources, and feel free to look around and talk to these guys. They're very knowledgeable when it comes to Moore knives in general, because I think they're a great tool that right now is still underrated in the U.S. market. Okay, thanks guys.
All right, SHOT Show day 2, and I want to talk to you about this, which is the Thrunite Archer 2A V3. This is my EDC for the day. So your settings, 0.2, 17, 75, and 500. You got the end pressure switch, and then your selector switch right there. This definitely is a slightly larger light than the other ones I've used, but I do like this one a lot. I like it because it does have that end switch to really quickly turn it on, and then when you want to adjust it to something lower, you can do that as well. There also is a strobe feature on this light as well. So cool light, takes 2 AA batteries, and for around $30, I think you're getting a lot of punch. So to have a light like this that runs off only 2 AA's and to have 500 lumens output is quite impressive. You can see it does have a pocket clip, and about that much about the pocket clip is going to be sticking out of your pocket. I wear this with a pair of jeans and it fits in it just fine. As you can see, the diameter of this is also a bit bigger than the TI4 or the TI5. So if you want something a bit bigger than those lights, I encourage you to check out the Thrunite Archer 2A V3. I put links down below if you want to purchase this light over on Amazon. Thanks as always for checking out the videos, and more are coming soon. Take care.